Hey guys, today we're doing a drugstore Poison Joffrey look, and this look is great for fancy dress parties because you don't need many products and it really doesn't take too long to put on. To start out, I'm testing a couple of shades of foundation to find one that's a few shades lighter than my own skin and is a bit cool toned because that will give us a really nice kind of ashy, ill looking complexion. This works better with a foundation that's not super heavy coverage, so you still get your skin tone showing through. That's what's going to make it look so ashy. I'm applying it really patchily with a foundation brush. And I'm not using any color correctors or concealers or anything like that because when Joffrey's been poisoned, he's super red in the cheeks and he's got the purple tinges under his eyes. So we want to keep as much of what we've already got as we can. I'm taking a slightly damp blending sponge and just blending out all of that foundation. And because it doesn't actually match my skin tone, I'm trying to go right up to my hairline so that I don't end up with a ring around my face so it looks kind of like a foundation mask. Even though this foundation doesn't match my face, it does match my neck pretty well. But if yours doesn't, make sure you bring it underneath your jawbone so you don't get that kind of stop line along your jawbone. I'm powdering it all with a light toned pressed powder. You could use a translucent powder for this if you don't have something to match your not matching shade of foundation. Then I'm taking a purple eyeshadow to accentuate the bags under my eyes, and I've gone for a purple that has a more brown undertone because that's the natural colour of my eye bags. If yours are more red or they're more brown than purple, then go for a shade that's going to match your natural eye bags. I'm using a pencil brush to just lightly dot some shadow along my natural eye bag line, and then taking a fluffier brush to blend it out. And I'm trying to keep the blending quite tight to where I've placed the line. If you bring it too far out, then it's going to start to look more like a sunken eye rather than an eye bag. I find it works best if you blend outwards from the inner corner because an eye bag is naturally more intense where it meets the eye in the inner corner and then it kind of fades out as it goes across the top of the cheekbone. So if you blend in that direction, you'll get that natural fade. And if things get a bit messy, you can just neaten them up with a little bit of foundation on a concealer brush or some of that face powder. For the redness on Joffrey's cheeks and forehead, I'm using a red eyeshadow and I've gone for quite a deep red with a cool undertone. Joffrey's very pale and he has a cool undertone in his skin, so the redness would have that same cool undertone. If your foundation is more yellow toned or pink toned, then you might want to go for a red that has the same undertone as your foundation. To apply the eyeshadow, I'm using a cheap makeup wedge that I've just picked lots of holes in the end of because the redness in Joffrey's face, it looks like lots of tiny little broken blood vessels. So if you really lightly tap the sponge on the eyeshadow and then lightly tap it on your face, you'll start to get that broken vein pattern. I really want the red to fade into the rest of the skin so it doesn't end up looking like, rosy cheeks or something. So without adding more product to the sponge, I'm just tapping around the edges of the red areas to get that fade. And of course we can go back in with that face powder around the edges just to help blend the red into the skin tone. And if you feel like the red is a bit too intense, then you can go in with face powder just to mute it down a bit. To make those broken blood vessels look a bit more intense, I'm taking a damp paintbrush with a pointed tip and using that same red eyeshadow just to draw in some small wiggly lines, and you can kind of follow what's already been put down by the sponge to just draw them in. And I'm keeping it most intense on kind of the apples of the cheeks and the center of the forehead. Now on to the fun stuff, drool. I'm using a white eyeliner with a tiny bit of yellow mixed in, and I'm just mapping out where that drool's going. Then I'm putting lash glue on top of it because that's going to make it look more like drool. Lash glue dries almost clear, not when you use this much of it, but you'll be able to see that yellow-white underneath and it's going to make it look more like vomit, drool type stuff. This will be a million times easier if you have a squeezy tube of lash glue. because then you can just squeeze it directly along that line from the tube. I ran out, so I had to use a bottle, and I've just emptied it out into a small pot, and I'm using the back end of a pair of tweezers to just apply it along that line. While I was waiting for my drool to dry, I tested out some different shades of liquid lipsticks, and I found a nice blood-coloured one. If you don't have a blood-coloured one, you can try mixing a couple together to get a decent shade. You don't really want to put liquid lipsticks next to your eyes, they're not designed for that. So I'm using a red eyeshadow just to go out from the corner of my eye, and then once I'm far enough out, I'm switching over to the liquid lipstick and just drawing blood trails coming from my eyes, coming from my nose, and I'm just using a reference picture of Joffrey and how all the blood kind of dripped down his face to see where those lines should go. You don't have to use a liquid lipstick for this part because the lash glue gets so thick on the blood that you can't see it through the lash glue in all the places, so you do have to go back over the top. So you could use an eyeshadow or a lip pencil or something, just something to kind of give it a base colour and map out where all the lash glue is going to go. You could skip the lash glue entirely and just kind of leave the look here. If you're using a liquid to matte lipstick, it should dry and stay in place. But the lash glue just gives it that more three-dimensional, drippy kind of look. Once I've finished all my blood trails, I'm doing the same thing as we did for the drool along the blood trails with the lash glue. And again, if you have a squeezy tube, this is going to be much faster and easier for you because you can just squeeze it along those trails. If not, use the back end of your tweezers. And if you kind of dot the lash glue on instead of swiping, then you get that nice rounded 3D look. Whatever you do, don't use like makeup brushes or a brush that you care about because the lash glue can really gunk up the bristles and that brush will probably end up having to go in the bin. I ended up doing about 3 coats with the lash glue, but you need to really let it dry in between each coat, otherwise when you try and apply another coat it will start sticking and pulling and it will get a really textured look, and dripping blood generally doesn't look very textured. You can see that the lash glue hasn't dried completely clear because it's so thick, so I went over it again with the liquid to matte lipstick. I wanted to keep my blood drips shiny because wet blood is shiny, but if you don't want that shiny look, you could go over it with a red eyeshadow just to get rid of that shine. And that's it guys, you're done. Now you look like one of the most hated fictional characters in the world. Obviously, you're going to look much more like Joffrey if you happen to be a blonde-haired boy when you do this look. I hope you liked this video guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!